Hello, I accuse Winston Churchill. This clip was about the so-called mutiny in North Wales in April of 1919. The First World War had ended in 1918, about a year before. There were still troops kept at Prestatyn and Rhys, North Wales, ostensibly for training to be sent to the front. Of course, there was no front. All the troops were going back being repatriated to their various points of origin in the Empire, except these troops. They'd been there for 3 years, some of them, training over and over again in the mud and the cold and the wet. It was an extremely cold period of British weather in Prestatyn and in Rhys, and they were in big camps outside the towns, not far from Bottlewood Castle, where I stayed one time. And every now and again I would hear strange little snippets of conversation, and so I would go to see St Margaret's Church, so I did. And I was walking along and I found 11 graves, beautifully kept, immaculate, of all Canadian soldiers, mostly about 22, 19 years old, who had been shot, all at dawn on the Saturday of the 22nd of April 1919, within minutes of each other. The eldest was 32, he was a sergeant, and the youngest was 15. So I asked a few questions. I didn't meet much response. It seemed the Welsh were very sensitive about this subject. I noticed I had to be walking along outside Bottlewood Castle. I was walking in, I think I was going towards the north. And that's where the old camp was. But of course I didn't know anything about this in those days. Out of the hillside appeared 2 Welsh gentlemen. I don't know if I had a camera or binoculars, why was I walking there? So after nearly 100 years, the Welsh are still very sensitive about what happened with the last mutiny in Britain, which was at that place. So I took the trouble to find out about it. I haven't been able to uncover much. There's an official version, which more or less sanitises the whole thing, but there's the reality of what happened there. It was pretty bad. And I wish to apologise to the Canadian people for what happened there. And I believe it was Winston Churchill who did this, who mismanaged the whole thing quite deliberately. I tried to say so on Facebook, but CIA keep overseeing what I'm writing and won't let me post half of this. So I warned them that I would in fact make a film of it and put it on the web. So the conditions at these camps were pretty bad. In fact, they were dire. They lived in kind of wooden huts with beaten earth floors, mud floors. In that sort of weather, they had to get their uniforms perfectly clean. Even though they had matte boots, they were expected to shine their boots, which is impossible. They had 1 blanket per man, 1 blanket. They slept on the floor. There was no heating in any of the huts except the sergeant's hut, which was apart from the rest. The officers never appeared at all. There were no parades. Well, there were, but they were NCO parades. There were no officers on parade at all, ever. It seems that officers all spent their time in the hotels in the local towns, didn't go to the camp that much. The RMO, who should have seen what was going on, that these men were being bullied unmercifully by the NCOs, never appeared at all. He was a drunk, known to be a drunk, and he stayed in the local hotel and he just stayed drunk, he didn't go there. There was talk that some of them had died of a disease. Well, there was no cholera reported in Wales that year. None. I looked it up. And so the 30-odd people did die of that camp the previous year in 1918, but it looks like they died of scurvy. And it's not surprising because these men were kept on short rations. Now, in an age when men were mostly suffering from malnutrition anyway, that's very serious. They had 1 meal a day of gruel, which is not very nice. You look it up in Oliver Twist. It's really bad stuff you can't keep. Fit young men working day and night, doing God knows what rubbish, on 1 plate of gruel a day. So, not surprisingly, they were dying of scurvy, which is a disgrace in itself. But more things happened than that. In the May of that year, there was an argument about a girl. This is not uncommon amongst soldiers. They had an argument, and the very next day they got hold of drink. Someone got some drink into the camps, and the camp exploded. They rioted for 3 days. That's the truth, they did. But there's rioting and there's rioting. These men, their discipline had broken down. They'd lost it. They'd lost it. They beat up a couple of sergeants and threw them out of the camp. The men themselves never left the camp, or they did, but they didn't go into the town. Not one woman of Wales was insulted even. They were particularly careful not to do anything like that, because it would have upset the Welsh. So they stayed in their camps. They wouldn't let the NCOs back in. The officers found out about it and didn't go to the camp to calm things down. They stayed in their posh hotels, phoning London for help. Well, so these are crummy officers, aren't they? And in fact, they're all British officers. They weren't Canadian officers. All these young men were Canadians. They shouldn't even have been there. They'd enlisted to help their mother country in her hour of need. And this is how they were treated. So they rioted, that is, they shouted and roared and broke things up and lounged about and wouldn't obey orders. Hardly the worst thing in the world. It's a breakdown of discipline. One that was long overdue from the sound of things. But word got back to Churchill in London. I believe he was in the War Office at the time. He wasn't even Prime Minister. Instead of sending responsible officers to calm the men down and ask them about their issues and get them back into barracks and then repatriate them as quickly as possible, which is what anybody else would have done, Churchill sends in the Irish Guards with fixed bayonets. He also took train to Wales himself. Of course, he was one of those micromanagers. No one could do anything without him being there. The Irish Guards apparently went in with fixed bayonets and those long stick things they used to have. The Black and Tans had, and they hated long batons. From every report I've read, there's not much left now. It appears that the men themselves didn't want to fight. They came to the camp, barbed wire, whatever it was, with white sheets and white flags wanting to parley. In other words, they weren't going to resist. The Irish Guards had come straight from the front, from the Somme and places like that, charged in and beat the living crap out of all of them, and 3 men were in fact killed. They weren't killed by the rioters, they were killed by the Irish Guards. Now the Irish and the Welsh have never really got on. The Irish and the Scots get on, the Welsh and the Scots get on, but the Irish and the Welsh don't get on. So it's a mistake to use Irish Guards anyway, obviously. But that's what happened. In fact, order was restored in both camps inside 2 hours. Right. So we've got a death toll so far of 5. 2 by accident in the beginning of the rioting. 3 when the Irish Guards went in. Right? But there are 11 men and 1 boy buried in St Margaret's Church. I heard, I didn't go and see myself, there's another 250 to 400 men buried in Prestatyn Cemetery. And there's talk of another lot at St Edgar's Church, which is somewhere close by. In other words, what the Welsh did was they buried the ones that the people knew about in the press in St Margaret's, but the rest of them they buried quietly elsewhere. And we're now talking about hundreds of men. Hundreds. And it gets worse. I'm going to find my place here, hold on a second. No word of the men's concerns ever reached their officers. The NCOs who caused this breakdown of discipline by their brought it to the men were never disciplined at all. Right? There was no real mutiny, it was more rioting. There were guns in those camps. They had the usual lock cupboard with guns in them. Those cupboards were not broken into. If it had been a mutiny, they would have done. They would have taken the guns. If it was a riot, they would have smashed up the town. What it was a breakdown of discipline, and that's all it was. Okay? These men have been going to be repatriated 5 times. 5 times they'd packed everything up and they were all going home. 5 times they were taken to the docks, they were all marched back again. Troops that had only just arrived in Wales went back ahead of them. 5 times. That's what really broke them. So he didn't go to the camp, he went to the camp. They were all arrested, locked down overnight, and the very next morning these court-martials started. Now, a court-martial is a court. It's a proper legal court. Just because they're all in uniform makes no difference. But the men weren't allowed to speak in their own defence, or at all. They had no legal representation whatsoever to speak for them. They were simply apparently marched in, told they were rioting, they'd broken the law, they would be shot. There were no records kept. We don't even know who the officers who were trying them. We don't know. All we do know is that Winston Churchill was there. Okay? So all these men were tried. Most of them were told if they spoke of anything that they were going to be repatriated, they were dishonourably discharged. If they ever spoke of anything what they would see and hear, they would be shot. That's the ones who survived. The rest of them were marched out and shot by their own officers in the head, in front of all of the men on the parade ground, on their own parade ground. Think about that. That's not a trial. They are executions by their own officers. The very same men who'd been asking for help and who were so bad at their duties, they'd never gone to the camp to see all this transpiring. This is after the men had tried to surrender with white flags, remember? And the worst of it was, remember that boy that I saw, the 15-year-old? 15 years old. That's the age he admitted to. So this is a child we're talking about. In those days, young people did this. They joined the army to be drummer boys and that kind of thing. Now, this particular boy, I was told, had a horror of a certain form of execution. He used to dream about it. He had a nightmare. And that was having a bayonet thrust through the top of his mouth and through the top of his skull. And I've been told that that's what they did to him. They did that to a 15-year-old boy. He wasn't even shot. He was killed in that fashion because he was afraid of it. And the proof of what I'm saying is in the pudding. If people would like to go to the various cemeteries, not just St Margaret's Church, but Prestatyn Cemetery and the little cemetery outside St Edgar's, which has got another couple of hundred in it, from what I'm told. Dig up that boy, and if you find that he's still got a bayonet stuck straight through his skull, which I assure you he does, we couldn't get it out, then we know it's true. What I'm saying is true. And what I'm saying is that these aren't court-martials, they're summary executions. And what I'm saying is that Winston Churchill did this quite deliberately, quite systematically. Their families were never told what happened to them. Never in 100 years. You know, it's just a travesty of military discipline and justice. A breakdown of discipline was described as a mutiny, which is no such thing. If it had been a mutiny, they would have taken those guns and used them. They didn't. They just had enough. The war was over, they should have been home a year before, and they knew it. They weren't educated men, they were ordinary working class boys. Just a little bit of kindness, a little bit of leeway. It could have been an honourable episode because they had been treated badly. So I accuse Winston Churchill of being a bloodthirsty, harsh, cruel and unnatural tyrant. I know now that he started the war with Germany. He agitated for it for years because he was jealous. I know that he was a paid lackey of the central banks, the same central banks that are causing trouble now. And this was Winston Churchill's real nature, that when he could, he liked to sit and watch boys being murdered. How do I know? Because we're told that he left the camp before the court-martial started, aren't we? That's what we're told. But if you look in the papers and what records there are, there's hardly anything left. It's all been carefully combed out. But I found out he didn't reappear in London until after the executions were finished. In other words, he did. He stayed there and he watched. So I accuse Winston Churchill of being a traitor to the English nation, an absolute pig to our allied friends from Canada, and a cruel and unnatural pervert. He was a traitorous monster.